All right, we are live from the Empowered Mom Studios. And today I got the idea in my head, another fairy tale. I know, right? I mean, I'm just full of these fairy tales, but they really send a message. And no, I'm not talking about Cinderella this time. I mean, I've talked about the glass slipper method and putting it out there. And I mean, the prince can hold on to that glass slipper all he wants, or he can go out and get his princess. But today I'm going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk, which is also another trope within Into the Woods. Like, it's another subversive fairy tale. So I'm going to teach both on like the original fairy tale and a part that not everybody knows about in that fairy tale that I uncovered in reading a whole bunch of them. I'd just been reading it with my kids, and there's a whole other layer to that fairy tale in the end. Like, how Jack steals the treasure from the giant, but there's actually more to it. And I'll tell you that in this video. I'm also going to share about how this ties into investing in your future and seeing a dream that nobody else sees as possible, or people overlook the little things and they don't realize that that little thing leads to a beanstalk that does lead up to a giant. Let's be honest about that. The challenges, the obstacles you're going to have to overcome, that can be incredibly scary, but there's treasure waiting for you, and there's actually more. All right. So I have had such an incredible journey, and a chapter of my life is coming to a close. At the end of this month, I am no longer going to be a student in VCA, Virtual Coach Accelerator. I have been in there since November of 2022. Before that, I was a student within Virtual Coach, and I was doing the student volunteer work, and I was in Startup Club before that. When I found that community, that in itself, I basically traded a cow for magic beans. And people didn't recognize that that's what I did, but that's what I did. Like, when you trade value in terms of money or your time, you're investing in something, you've got this cow. So just like in the Jack and the Beanstalk story, both Into the Woods and the actual one, Jack has this beloved cow, and the family is poor. They have no money and they're starving. And the mother is basically a widow, and they never actually tell what happens to the father, but I'm leading into that because that's the end of the story. You find out what happened to the father, why the father wasn't there, why they were living in that hovel, why they were so destitute. And what ultimately happens is how they get back on their feet, and they have this prosperous life. And there's more waiting for them. But the thing is that you trade in the value, the little bit that you have, the last little bit that you have. And this is what I did. It's like, I don't have much to offer, but I do have my time, and I do have a little bit of money that I've been able to scrape together. And it's all I have, but I'm putting it all in. I put everything all in. And people would be like, but you're getting beans back. You're getting hardly anything for like they don't see it. So the mother in the story, of course, she goes to Jack and she's like, why the hell did you just trade our cow for a bunch of magic beans? Like, you say that they're magic, but they're not magic. There's nothing magical about them. She takes a look at those beans that the peddler in the original story and the baker and his wife in the Into the Woods story, they know that the beans are like from the witch's garden and that maybe they're magic. There's actually a song in the actual like musical version, not in the Disney movie version, but in the other one. It's like, well, maybe they're magic. They could be magic. We don't know, but we need this cow to complete our spell. So we'll say anything to get Jack to take the beans because we need his cow. We need the cow as white as milk. So they gave him the beans, but the beans are magic. They're magic because the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. So the mother takes a look at these beans, doesn't see the value in them, and tosses them out the window. And Jack is like, well, you just threw my magic beans out the window. You don't see the value in them, but I know that something good was coming from them. The people said, like, I felt it. I felt like it was a good trade. And Jack was right. Because what happens? A beanstalk sprouts. Now, a beanstalk in itself is a very valuable thing when you're starving because it has these giant beans that you could theoretically feed yourself. But instead of taking those beans it's like, go pick some beans. No, Jack climbs the entire beanstalk. Like you can just imagine how high Jack is trying to climb this beanstalk. And a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, this is so high. Why would I ever keep climbing? I'm so high off the ground already. And I don't know when this thing ends. And I could be climbing forever. And I don't even know what is up at the top. But Jack climbs up. And what does he see but a magnificent palace? And he thinks, wow, like there's this palace. And maybe once I get inside, I'll be able to take some riches. But there's a giant in there. There's a big obstacle to defeat to get to those riches. So Jack tries to take what he can. And at the same time, in the fairy tale version, and even in Into the Woods, Jack climbs up 3 times. So in the first part, he's actually like, there's a lady giant and she's so comforting and like she's just amazing. And then she's got the husband, but you got to get away before that. But she feeds you. And then Jack steals away some of the treasure and then he keeps coming back. And the third time he steals the golden harp and the harp cries out and it's like, oh no, the giant's chasing him. But here's the thing. When Jack defeats the giant at the end, not in the Into the Woods version, because the giant wife comes down and tries to kill everybody. Spoiler, sorry. But in the other version, the fairy tale version, the giant is dead. And it turns out that the giant's wife didn't actually like that guy. She was just kind of under his control. And it turns out that palace that Jack was in was actually his all along. In fact, in the story, in the ending, it's like, it turns out that what had happened is that the father had been killed and they had been fled. They had to flee that palace. They had to flee that place and go to that hovel. So now that the evil giant is dead, they go back up there and they live happily ever after. He takes his mother and they're back in their palace. So when you look at that story, what does that really teach you? Well, first of all, it teaches you that nothing comes without trading in some sort of value. If you truly want magic in your life, and this is what I embody in all of my teaching as well, and this is why my book's out there, and this is why I have it's like, trade in a little bit of value, go get my book. And it seems like it's just an ordinary book, but really it's magic beans that are going to turn into a beanstalk. You're going to have to climb it. You're going to have to defeat your own giants. But at the end, you're going to live like a queen. And this is the same with everything. Like I put it out there and something is coming on Friday. And I'm finally going to reveal like the whole thing is like, if you go onto my channel on Friday, after 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific, there are going to be 3 videos dropped. One is an introduction that says, yes, I actually am reading my entire book over the summer. It's going to finish at the start of July, and then it's moving into something else. But this is my goal, is to make sure that that book gets in the hands of anyone who needs it, because it's such a low-level thing. That's like, I just want that magic out there. It's magic beans. Now you can go and eat the beans, or you can plant the beans and make a beanstalk and take the beans off the beanstalk, or you can climb the beanstalk and you can go and fight the giant and you can go and get your ultimate treasure. And if you need a little bit of help, well, I'm there. And at the same time, I'm going to be taking the summer off. I mean, as much as I can take the summer off, because I get insights and I like to share, and like I'll be doing some very like spontaneous stuff. So in the summertime, what happens is that I stop my usual structured way of doing things, and instead I go on my Instagram lives and I just share my insights as I see them. So I go into the mom groups, I see a question, and then I go and do a video. And then eventually I edit that video and I put it on YouTube. So that's what I've been doing is I've scheduled all my stuff, and they're all little magic beans that will lead to the beanstalk and allow them to climb up. Because the thing is that you need to trade in your value, either in your time or in your money, in order to get something back. And what you may get back might look to other people to just be some ordinary beans. But you need to recognize that they're magic. You need to see the magic. You need to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, in the tiny little trails of breadcrumbs that lead to something bigger. You need to be able to see that if you planted these, well, first of all, you've got these magic beans, but they're still beans. You could plant them. You might just get a regular beanstalk. Still, you're fed. Or it could be a magical beanstalk and you climb it. And then you see what's beyond those clouds. And you see that actually that little bit of like, you put that value, put all in, you took your cow and you traded it all in and you got beans, but now you've got the whole kingdom, basically, because you were patient. You recognize that there might be a giant up there and you're not afraid of the giant. I mean, you might be a little afraid of the giant. You might be wary and you might plan and get strategic to make sure that giants don't squish you. At the same time, you're going to get resourceful. You're going to be like, yeah, there's going to be pushback. And I teach this to my clients. Like, how do I avoid the pushback in the medical system? And I'm like, oh, there's going to be pushback. There's no doubt about it. There will be pushback, and you can be pleasantly surprised, and the pushback may not be as scary as you thought, but there is going to be something. But if I train you up to be like, I'm going to go up there because there's something up there, and I know there's something up there, and I'm not going to stay on the ground. I'm going to get my dreams, and I'm either going to get it or die trying, but I'm going to get it. Because if I don't climb that beanstalk, I'll never know what's up there. And if I don't do it, and there's something waiting for me, literally my kingdom is waiting for me because I am the crown prince and I'm supposed to climb up and get my kingdom back. I need to defeat the giant to get my kingdom back. Like, that's the thing, is like Jack was meant to be up there. So it's like the empowered birth, if you have the dream in your heart for it, it's meant for you. And when you don't take that, well, what happens is you end up just struggling. You end up with that trauma. And it sucks. It really sucks. In fact, in chapter 7 of my book, I actually address that outright. It's like things didn't go the way you wanted. And like you're devastated by this. Like this is not how you thought things were going to go. You thought you had the plan. You thought you had the map. You thought you were doing it. And unfortunately, the person that you went to was actually somebody who didn't have magic beans. They just pretended that they had magic beans, but they weren't magic. And it actually, you got hurt. Now, I actually have magic beans. And I don't just have magic beans. I know where all the beans are. And I make sure I find out where other people's magic beans are. And I pay attention to that genius because I know that if somebody comes along and they're trading their cow in, that's all they have. Now, if they only have $10 and they want to have a natural birth, they can go and get my book and it will help them as long as they do the work. I mean, they still got to climb the beanstalk. I can't climb it for them. If they have more than that and they put it into my course, I'm going to make damn sure that that course helps them. In fact, one of the things I noticed in the mom groups is that a lot of moms would be like, is it worth it for me to get this course? Or is it worth it for me to take this class? And a lot of the moms are saying, I don't know, like it didn't help me, or it is pretty high of an investment. And it's like, well, I don't have very much to give. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, if you go in there and you trade in your cow, your last piece of like resource that you have, and it doesn't work for you and you get traumatized, that's not okay with me. And that is why I am putting my book on YouTube. It's out there. Because even if somebody doesn't have even $10 to their name, I want to make sure that they have that magic. Because again, it's about having a guide to help you climb that beanstalk and be like, oh, yeah, you're going to have to fight this giant. And I've already been up here and I've already seen that, like, this giant, he actually has a weakness. And you can get that and recognize the weakness, because when you actually recognize that everybody has a different giant, everybody has a different magic kingdom, and our methods of climbing the beanstalk are all going to be different depending on what we're able to do and what we're trading in. So how does this tie into me being the resourceful person I am? Again, I go all in. If I know something is meant for me and that nothing else will compare, and I sense the magic in the beans, damn straight I'm going to follow it. Damn straight I'm going to plant those beans. Damn straight I'm going to climb that beanstalk. Even if there's nothing up there, I'm going to climb it just to see. And I will be paying attention the whole time to see, where is it? And if I get hints that I'm on the right track, well, then I'm just going to keep going until I have, like, until there's nothing there. I'm going to keep going. I don't give up, ever. When I know something is speaking to my heart and I still have that dream and I still have those hints and I still have those messages, either like in the physical or even in my dream space. If something comes to me and calls to me, oh, you'd better believe I'm going to keep climbing that beanstalk. I don't care how long it takes. It could take 20 years. But at the end of climbing that beanstalk, if it takes me 20 years, well, then it took me 20 years and it was worth it. I will put in the work every single day to get my reward. So I don't know what's going to come over the summer. I have no idea. What I do know is that my magic is out there. And what I do know is that the magic that I've put out there is highly valuable and will help people, because I based it on what I was already doing with my clients when I was scattering things out and people were already telling me that I needed to charge money and I needed to do this. And I've helped so many people already. And one of my clients that I took on last year, 232. Awesome. One of my clients that I took on last year, we had a big ass giant to fight. Like, without going into major details, they were in a country that was very restrictive in how they did birth. I was aware of those pitfalls because, of course, I don't just pay attention to what happens here. I pay attention to what happens in all parts of the world so that I can point out where somebody might want to make improvements and what also is possible in other countries. Because the UK has a different model for birth than the US. And Canada kind of fluctuates between them, and we're not always doing the best for our moms. We're just not. And the US has their issues, and I pay attention to all of this. In fact, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage is written by someone who is a former midwife, and she's now a childbirth educator, and she also educates birth workers. And she basically was talking about what was going on in the UK. So I was aware of the political dynamics. I was aware of the potential pitfalls. I was aware where things might be kind of tricky. And I also didn't live in that country, but my client did, and she understood it. So I was also learning from her, which of course is going to help me in the future. But I knew, okay, they've got the one really powerful thing that a lot of people I have to work towards. The partner is the wild card. They really are. They're the right support. That's why pillar number 5 is at the end of my overall system, is because the partner is the wild card. Well, she had an amazing partner, and I could see that dynamic. They needed the help with the advocacy and getting past their fear. They already had the desire to climb that beanstalk and fight that giant. But again, it was a pretty big thing for them to do that. And they hit some challenges that put them face to face with that giant in a way that if they didn't have certain knowledge that I had imparted on them, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe it would have been okay, or maybe it wouldn't have been. But by doing that initial work, they traded their cow for magic beans. When I got on the call with them, I knew instinctively that they were already struggling as they were, and they were down to their last cow. And they had this cow, and they were like, do I go over here and invest in this, or do I go and invest with you? And I had to ask them the questions like, well, what happens if this agency that you are looking to hire, what happens if they don't get back to you? Because they've been kind of jerking you around. And I also knew that the kind of birth that they wanted would probably not get supported within that agency, because when you go into a system and it's somebody else's rule book, you're playing by their rules, and that can screw you over. And there's certain things that they just won't touch with a 39.5-foot pole. Yeah, that was a Grinch reference, but still, like, it's the idea. It's like they're not going to touch it. There's certain types of births that I support clients with that a lot of people won't touch. And I'm just helping them with information and in getting them past their fear so they can do it themselves. Because that's the other thing, is they get backed into a corner and they have no choice but to do it themselves, because it's either that or fight, beg, compromise. And then what I did is it's like, you can do it yourself. They were confident they could do it themselves. And when they decided to call in that medical help, they weren't doing it from a place of desperation anymore. They were doing it from a place of, we can already climb this beanstalk. We can already fight this giant, and we're going to get our gold, and we're going to get our kingdom back. And they reclaimed their power. And it was 3 days where I did not know how this was going to play out. And I actually shared this on my Instagram, and I shared this even here on Facebook in the personal page. Obviously this is going to go on YouTube later, but I shared that. I had no idea. Like, this was a really hard giant to fight in terms of what they were dealing with. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, there are so many different ways that they could get screwed over out of this. And I was praying so much. And, a miracle had also happened around that time. And it allowed, like, I don't know what it is, but this thing happened. And then all of a sudden, my client is in labor, and like, it's going in a direction that I think it's going to fall apart. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to have to help them through birth trauma afterwards, which I do. I do help people reframe their story, because that's part of it. If they've already had traumatic births, they've already been defeated a few times. So they need to realize that the power is still in them and that they can do it. So that's why my chapter 7 is called How to Heal and Get the Birth You Want the Next Time. Because the fact is that oftentimes, you think you're following one direction as first-time mom, and you make a whole bunch of mistakes. I made 7 of them. And that led to Hunter's birth, which again is why I am putting my magic out there. May 17th, 10 o'clock in the morning, it's going to start dropping. And the first 3 videos, the introduction, it's basically getting started. Yes, I am I'm reading my entire book. This is the empowered birth movement. This is the overall of it. This is what you're going to learn. And when I'm going to drop them, then the introduction. I read my introduction. I tell my story in my introduction, and how I used my 5-pillar system to basically rise up from the ashes, and how it ties to birth and how it ties to my dear best friend, Jenny, and how she is transformed because she wasn't even going to bother to have another baby. She just wanted to learn for herself. And then she did. And she had the most amazing empowered birth story. It's just epic. And then I go into chapter 1, the natural birth traps. And then after that, I go into another chapter each week on Friday, dropped again in the morning, and it's going to be out there. And I go through every single chapter of my book. And I also talk about what I plan to do with the empowered birth movement and everything else, my insights, all of the magic. So people can watch it for an hour, or they and trade in their time for these amazing magic beans that will allow them to climb the beanstalk. Or they can be like, oh, it's too much and I'm not going to do that. Well, that's okay. It's still there. And maybe somebody else will see the value of those beans. I'm sure that there were a lot of people that passed on those magic beans before the peddler got to Jack and Jack took them. And I think in one version of the story, the peddler was actually a wizard. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, there's different versions of it. But the idea, again, is that some people will look at those magic beans and they'll toss them and they won't do anything with them. Well, now my magic is out there. My starter guide is out there. My website is like streamlined. It's got all the magic. And those magic beans are there. But people have got to do the work. They've got to be willing to plant those beans and climb the beanstalk to get there. And I'll be the guide. I'll remind them of what's up there, that the treasure is theirs. And again, when something is highly valuable, you got to do the work. And I've put in my work. I've put in so much work. Over the last several years, people outside of my community, even family members, have been like, you're putting in all of this effort and I don't understand why you're doing all this for free. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea what's coming. Yeah, maybe I may not get complete rewards, but the rewards I have been getting are pretty freaking epic. The connections I've made are pretty freaking epic. And I can see the map and it's coming clearer. And I'm climbing that beanstalk. And I know that at the top, there will probably be a giant that I'm going to have to fight. And I don't mind a challenge. In fact, certain people in my life love to challenge me, love to keep me on my toes. And that makes me respect them and love them more because I myself am very protective of my energy now. I don't just give out my personal support to just anyone. So if you've gotten it, that's a magic bean. You got to plant it for it to grow. You can't just keep coming back to me and ask for a magic bean. You got to plant the one you've got and you got to climb the beanstalk because I already gave it to you. Now, if you'd like my support and guidance in climbing that beanstalk, absolutely. And again, you got to trade in the cow or something else that I need in order to get it. Because I am so busy planting those beans out into the world, the seeds, the magic, and I'm protecting it now. I'm scattering the light where I want it, and it's going to grow. And I have no idea what's going to come in the next few years. All I know is that my chapter has ended and I'm going on to another one. And I'm really excited. Even though I don't know what's coming, I'm really excited because I've had hints and I've had bigger hints and more hints. And yeah, summer's going to be epic. No matter what happens, summer's going to be freaking epic because those videos are going to drop and I scheduled them. So they're going to drop already, like it's already set up and they're scheduled all the way into the summer. And I'm just going to come in when I want to come in. And share my insights when I want to share them. But it is beach weather. It is summer. It is lay out in the sun and connect with my kids time. Because my kids are going to be home and they're going to want to be with mommy. And it's chaos with my kids home. And it's also, I enjoy my summers. And I wanted to protect that time. Same with spring break, same with winter break. I protect that time. If there's certain family occasions, I protect that time. And nobody is without a magic bean. They just have to go and see it for what it is. And everything on my website, like people will look at that link and I'll say, go look at it. And if they're just like, oh, well, I'll look at it later. That's too bad. It really is. It really sucks when they do that. And I can't control who throws the beans out the window and doesn't plant them versus those who don't even take them. That's not in my control. What's in my control is to point out just how magical those beans are and trust that the right people will see it because Jack saw it and I see it and my friends see it. And we are all magical. And I will connect those who need to be connected. And I'm also going to be testing along the way. So look out, world, because the phoenix has risen to her magnificence. And I'm just going to keep climbing. And I'm going to plant more beans. And yeah, that's all I have. The kids are about to be home. I got to go. I love you. And I'll talk to you soon.